Vitalism has given way to a concern for stability. Expressionism has lost ground to a fear of exploration, of the new, etc.
En el libro de actas de esta corporación, correspondiente a las juntas de gobierno, figura con fecha 20 de abril de 2017 el acuerdo válido, entre otros, de nombrar académico de honor al excelentísimo señor doctor don EDMUND PHELPS.
¿Ratificáis vuestra aceptación de ingreso a la Real Academia Europea de Doctores? ¿Prometéis cumplir fielmente los estatutos de la Real Academia Europea de Doctores y aportar vuestro saber y colaboración en vuestros trabajos científicos, tanto de carácter individual como colectivo, con el fin de velar por el prestigio de nuestra institución cuantas veces fuereis requerido para ellos?
Señor Javier Blanco, representante institucional de la Fundación Cajasol, eminentísimo y reverendísimo señor Cardenal Arzobispo emérito de Barcelona, excelentísimas autoridades, excelentísimos señores académicos, señoras y señores. Excuse me. It is my pleasure and a deep honor to welcome as honorary academician His Excellency Dr. EDMUND PHELPS, a leading global thinker in the intersection of economy, justice, philosophy, and humanities, who has devoted his academic life to put people, as we know them, into economic theory. An academic such as the recipient, who is able to contribute to this discipline upon the shoulders of Miguel de Cervantes, embodies the true essence of the Royal European Academy of Doctors, that since its inception in 1914 aspires to build a path of convergent knowledge. In order to promote this interdisciplinarity, it is our tradition that the presentation of a new academician of a given discipline is handed to a member of a different discipline. The more observant amongst you might have noticed that the buttons of my gown are red, meaning my professional background is as a lawyer, while the gown itself is orange, which signals a PhD in the field of business administration, not economic science as wrongly stated in the invitation. My sincere apologies to the economists present. Before beginning in earnest, I would like to express my gratitude to the board of the Royal European Academy of Doctors, and particularly to its president, Dr. Alfredo Rocafort, for granting me the great privilege of presenting Dr. Edmund Phelps. The recipient was born during the Great Recession of the 1930s in Evanston, Illinois. He spent his childhood in Chicago and from age 6 grew up in Hastings-on-Hudson, where he developed a passion for music. The first clue that His Excellency would become a prominent economist rather than a musician can be found in the influence that his parents exerted on him during his formative years. Raised in a business-oriented family, Dr. Phelps recalls feeding his imagination by devouring the newspapers that his father brought home each night from New York, and then discussing financial and economic news during dinner time. Having been seduced by philosophy at Amherst College, he also tried a course in economics at the request of his father, thus discovering that the discipline was a good fit for him, and I quote, which indeed it was. He went on to graduate school at Yale during the golden age of this academic institution. He was influenced by such esteemed role models as William Fellner, Thomas Schelling, together with PhD supervisor James Tobin. In 1995, he was awarded his PhD, and after a short but fruitful period working at the Rand Corporation, he returned in search of academic stimulus, becoming an active researcher at Yale, the University of Pennsylvania, Columbia University, and most recently at the Minjian University. As public recognition of a life of creation, exploration, and interior development, His Excellency has received more than 120 honors and awards from the most prestigious academic, political, and professional institutions worldwide, including being the sole winner of the Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel 2006 for his analysis of intertemporal trade-offs in macroeconomic policy. The research of the recipient is so vast, rich, and innovative that summarizing this work has proven a real challenge. I have divided his work into two periods: Dr. Phelps' research in the 20th century and his work thereafter. Regretfully, time allows only that I will mention his most well-known ideas, but do please forgive me if I have omitted anything. His academic contribution during the 20th century has been acclaimed for its decisive role on economic theory and macroeconomic policy. Three breakthrough ideas are at the core of this recognition: the expectations augmented Phillips curve, the equilibrium rate of unemployment, and the so-called golden rules. Dr. Phelps' breakthrough analysis of intertemporal trade-offs between consumption by current generations and consumption by future generations started at Yale with his early work on the golden rules of capital accumulation and economic growth. In layman's terms, Dr. Phelps demonstrated that by foregoing consumption for investment in physical as well as human capital, today's generation can raise the welfare of future generations. Moreover, he also noted that all generations may, under certain conditions, gain from changes in the savings rate. Moving on to Penn University in the late 1960s, Dr. Phelps refocused his research, thus challenging the standard view of a stable trade-off between inflation and unemployment, which was thought to allow an expansionary fiscal and monetary policy to permanently increase employment. In contrast, through the formulation of the expectation augmented Phillips curve and the first model of the determinants of the equilibrium unemployment, Dr. Phelps highlighted that long-run rate of unemployment is determined by the functioning of the labor market. This theoretical framework not only helped the understanding of the causes of the increase in both inflation and unemployment, that took place during the 70s, but also clarified the limitations of macroeconomic policy. In the words of Robert Dimond, Phelps' publications at Yale won him recognition as a rising star in the profession, but those published while he was at the University of Pennsylvania changed how economists do macroeconomics. From the mid-80s to the late 90s, driven by the seemingly permanent rise of unemployment in Europe, Dr. Phelps devoted himself to the analysis of structural causes which determined equilibrium unemployment. Overall, the recipient summarizes his 20th century work thus: for decades, I quote, "My research was driven by outstanding problems in macroeconomics, mainly growth theory and employment theory. Then, around 1990, my research turned to the study of economic systems, and my development as an economist took on an added dimension." It is this added dimension which was to become a key aspect of his 21st century work, and is my focus now. As a co-founder and director of the Center on Capitalism and Society at Columbia University, Dr. Phelps' work from the turn of the millennium embodies the main purpose of the center, which is to analyze what determines a country's ability to generate and select innovative ideas and create an economy that is both dynamic and inclusive. This central economic quest is also at the core of the works that His Excellency has generously contributed to this Royal Academy: Designing Inclusion, the structuralist perspective on real exchange rate, share price level, and employment path, and the dynamism of nations toward a theory of indigenous innovation. The latter building on his highly acclaimed book, Mass Flourishing. As his fellow Nobel Prize winner Robert Shiller affirms, this book is what Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations should have been about if it were to have been an even better, more important book. Going on to say, Mass Flourishing contains much history, but it focuses more on what society should do today, and it provides a call to action. This torch has been particularly embraced in China, where the recipient was first dean and since 2016 has been the honorary dean of the new Huadu Business School. Signaling the impact of Dr. Phelps' 21st century research in this country, in 2014, Premier Li Keqiang granted him the China Friendship Award, the highest honor for foreign experts who have made outstanding contributions to the country's economic and social progress. Indeed, last March, China's premier openly acknowledged Dr. Phelps' ideas when he declared that China's mass entrepreneurship innovation initiative has a strong vitality. Regarding the Western world, Dr. Phelps assures that the modern economy, which allowed certain countries to flourish during the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, is today under threat. Highlighting the importance of mass indigenous innovation to recuperate dynamism in such nations, Phelps asserts that although a person's desire to innovate may be inborn to a degree, it can be boosted by supportive attitudes of parents and teachers, and it can be repressed by unwelcoming or hostile attitudes toward creativity or novelty. Querría acabar esta presentación con un guiño a Viviana Mondor, su esposa y compañera en este periplo, citando una frase atribuida a su compatriota Jorge Luis Borges, que reza así: el verbo leer, como el verbo amar y el verbo soñar, no soporta el imperativo, el modo imperativo. Pues bien, la obra reciente del Reficiendiario nos demuestra que una sociedad dinámica e inclusiva tampoco lo soporta. Tomemos, pues, el testigo que lanza el doctor Phelps en su obra y seamos Quijotes en la promoción, especialmente entre los jóvenes, del interés por la buena vida que el recipiendario propone. Una vida de investigación, creación, exploración y desarrollo interior. Bienvenido, Dr. Phelps. This is a grand moment for all of us, and without doubt will prove to be the beginning of a fruitful collaboration and, above all, a warm relationship. Thank you very much.
Economics experience has changed enormously, and our thinking must change too. For a century or so, most people found peace of mind in the faith their economy would offer abundant jobs and rising wages for all. The country could thrive on the unending discoveries of scientists, which wafted onto the economy like manna from heaven. Science was the eternal God and Savior. Silicon Valley was the church. This was the early 20th century view of the German historical school, Joseph Schumpeter and Friedrich Hayek. People also came to believe that a participant in this economy did not have to do anything to share in these basic rewards of participating, to have a job and to have wage increases. They believed the market largely determines the reward from one's work and the return on one's wealth. A person's own engagement and responsibility plays little or no part in these rewards. Thus, these rewards are thought to be fundamentally societal, not personal. Beliefs about achievement also grew up. If a business undertaking or an innovative development occurs, it is not thanks to some entrepreneur's insight into how a thing could be done or someone's vision of a better method or product. It is just the hard work of nameless participants reacting to signals of opportunities in a market economy. So the belief is that the achievements in the economy are not significantly personal, even in the economies of the West's relatively modern nations. One's imagination, initiative, and business judgment and acumen have no part to play in the evolution of one's career. That view may remind you of an oft-quoted comment addressed to someone forming a company. You did not build that. The speaker's point was that if a new business undertaking or an innovative development is occurring, it is not thanks to some entrepreneur's insight into how a thing could be done or someone's vision of a better method or product. It is not a personal achievement. These beliefs led some economists to the further idea that companies, large ones at any rate, could offer workers lifetime contracts when joining a company. Companies would become fiefdoms. An economy might be turned into a virtual nirvana. In this decade, some distinguished economists have been proposing that public policy reorient the economy toward increased leisure, public amenities, and longer life expectancy through tighter curbs on the work week and higher tax rates on consumer goods. Various non-economists have gone farther, proposing a universal basic income, the UBI. Thus, the economy might be turned into a virtual Shangri-La, everyone very tranquil and passive. These beliefs do not mean, it might be added, that the private sector does not need some managing from time to time. A range of adherents to this perspective on the economy all say that when the economy apparently veers off course, it is appropriate to inject some stimulus to regain demand or cut some tax rates to boost supply. More broadly, believers in this doctrine I am outlining speak of the economy as failing the society, without contemplating the possibility that society is failing the economy. This mechanist belief system I've been describing is wrong about the rise of the great economies of our history. It misunderstands how the brilliant economies from 1820 to 1970 or so, Britain and America, later Germany and France, brightened the lives of most participants while also performing prodigal feats of productivity growth. As my latest book, Mass Flourishing, argues, just being published in a Spanish edition, innovation was, in my book, not one rush after another to make commercial applications of the latest discovery by some of the world's scientists. Innovation was indigenous, and it was endemic and chronic. Almost every economic advance, I argued, large and small, sprung from one or more individuals in the economy who conceived a better method or product and who judged it had adequate chances of adoption to warrant developing it and marketing it. These people in the economy, a great number of them, were operating at all levels, were not responding to an opportunity that revealed itself or was stumbled upon, but rather to the call of their individualism, their desire to think for themselves, express themselves, and to venture into the unknown. Moreover, the mechanist theory that I was describing before, with its fixation on science, does not have a plausible understanding of why some sophisticated economies continue to lag behind others, and why some have changed places in the rankings. Now, reality is creeping in. It is widely seen that the economies of the West are very sick, to varying degrees, of course. Those who subscribe to the mechanist theory, such as the Keynesians and the supply-siders, are struggling to explain it with their theories, but not succeeding at all well. No wonder a deep unease has taken hold in the West. In my view, nearly all the advanced economies in the West, certainly France and Italy, but also US, UK, and even Germany, have long suffered from two basic symptoms. First, these economies have shown since the 60s or earlier, leaving aside the internet boom, slow growth of what economists call total factor productivity, or TFP. It means the productivity of a basket of labor and capital, not the productivity of one or the other. The slowdowns of this TFP were greatest in what were the lead economies, The US slowed in the late 60s, France in the 80s, Germany in the 90s, and the UK slowed again at the beginning of the present years. Countries in which the declines in indigenous innovation were quite strong. Investment and wages ultimately slowed as well as a result of the slowdown of productivity. This is Alvin Hansen's secular stagnation. Second, in these same economies, working class wages or jobs, or both, have disappointed expectations. In France, manufacturing employment has fallen since the 70s by 15% of total employment in the economy. In Germany, the bottom 40% of the population have the same income they had 25 years ago. In the US, average hourly compensation of production and other non-supervisory workers in the private sector grew far more slowly than that of other people in the economy. And non-participation of men ages 25 to 64 rose from around 3% in 1965 to nearly 10% in 2005. This is what we call a loss of inclusion. The loss of growth helps to account for a broad discontent over recent decades with working life in America. And in Europe, perhaps, it helps explain what seems to be a widespread lack of interest in work among Europeans. When growth is slow, because employers are not involved in entrepreneurial pursuits, and fewer still are involved in innovative pursuits, work in the business sector is less engaging. The lag of working class wages behind other wages may help to account for the discontent in the working class. Sensing they cannot meet the standards of others, or even their parents, may cause them a loss of self-respect. John Rawls, the American philosopher, spoke of the shame a father may feel who cannot afford to perform his duties as a father, to take his son to a ball game or a soccer match, as you might imagine. However, the trouble is more acute in several countries. Alienation and downright hostility has developed in the Rust Belts, in America's Appalachia, Britain's West Midlands, France's Lorraine region, and no doubt smaller areas. In these troubled regions, good jobs have been lost, relatively good jobs, mostly in manufacturing, forcing many men to take less preferred jobs in retailing and in some highly routine services. I believe this is more serious than might be thought. Economists typically treat job losses and pay cuts of workers as simply subtractions from their long lifetime income, and thus their consumption and leisure. Now, there is a literature on one's feelings about one's work. That literature suggests that when men lost good jobs, many of them lost the feeling of economic independence that those jobs provided. And food stamps don't provide that feeling of independence. Second, these men lost their feeling of importance to their family, their community, even their country. This community of workers may have come to feel, as the years wore on, that society has showed them a lack of respect. In addition, these workers may also feel an injustice if high-income earners are not redistributing any of their gains to the working class, or they see benefits being paid to people who don't even work at all. Maybe these people who have lost their good jobs have replaced the poorest people in population as being the country's worst off people. Recent work of mine has sought to go beyond the sociological to focus on the experiential rewards of working. Good jobs offer a sense of agency, a space in which a person might do meaningful work. People need such work to have a chance of prospering, especially in the non-material sense, of having the experience of succeeding at something. People value also the experience of flourishing, of becoming, of constantly forming in the course of a career. They also appreciate chances for self-expression through imagining and creating useful things. The good jobs in parts of manufacturing offered men some prospect of learning, some challenges, and some attendant promotions. The bottom-rung jobs in retailing services that these men have been forced to take do not offer those things. In losing good jobs, then, these men were losing the meaning of their very lives, or at least a central part of their lives. It is a mark of the seriousness of the problem that many working class men, frustrated over the jobs available to them, have left the labor force. In much of the West, unemployment has recovered to rather low levels. But male labor force participation is considerably decreased. Moreover, to the extent the workers forced out of good jobs are now in not good jobs, individuals are less free, so that things don't work, and economic growth could be slower because of that. The two symptoms that I've been talking about, the slow growth and the losses of good jobs, are threatening our countries, dulling business life and eating away at inclusion. Ways may be found to alleviate the problem without grasping the root causes. But we need to find the illness or illnesses causing these symptoms. What then are the underlying causes? Regarding the erosion of good jobs in manufacturing, some economists see the cause as a type of innovation, a bad innovation rather than the good innovations from 1920 to 1960, leading to automation and reduced demand for skilled labor. Others see it as a consequence of trade, globalization. I have run a little test. I regard America, Britain, and maybe with some hesitation, France, I regard them as innovation nations. And for this purpose, I will regard Germany and the Netherlands as trading nations. Then I asked the question, which countries have suffered the larger decline in the male participation rate? The innovators, the innovative nations, or the trading nations? I found large declines of male participation in the innovation nations, while male participation in the trading nations didn't go down. In fact, it went up. And there's another reason why it's not trade, it's innovation. And that is, when you look at the national income accounts, you see that output of manufacturers as a share of gross domestic product has not declined in the US and Britain and I think also France. It's the employment in those industries that has declined. So it doesn't sound like it's trade and, it doesn't sound as though trade is the problem. Regarding the slow growth in Europe's most advanced economies, I attribute it to a large loss of innovation, both indigenous and imported, in capital-intensive industries, most of them in the consumer goods producing sectors. Regarding the loss of inclusion in recent decades, I attribute it to a new kind of innovation taking place in relatively labor-intensive parts of the manufacturing sector. But we cannot rule out the possibility that cheaper manufacturers have indirectly helped to pull up wages to a considerable degree by building up the supply of capital and thus reducing the prices of consumer goods relative to manufacturers. The large economies of the West are complicated. What then can be done? There are myriad things that ought to be done, and perhaps each of these has found some support. Revive innovation and entrepreneurial activity by making it easier to start new firms and to fire workers, by cutting back the bureaucracy and reducing tax burdens on startup firms. Further, we might allow new firms to enter existing industries and compete on a level playing field with existing firms. We might meet the loss of inclusion by trimming the welfare state as needed in order to finance massive subsidies to low-wage employment. But if I am right, these steps and other needed steps will not be undertaken as long as the West remains devoted to a sort of postmodern doctrine. That doctrine calls on the government to defend established companies from competition by outsiders in the name of solidarity, to burden the creation and development of new firms through labor law, aggressive labor unions, and comprehensive regulation in the name of social protection, and to practice clientelism, even nepotism, through a colossal public sector in the name of the social good. This doctrine, born in the 1890s, first tried in the 20s, and then revived unofficially in the 60s, has driven out the modernist values of individualism, vitalism, expressionism that had nourished Western innovation for more than a century. Europeans, on any wide scale at any rate, will never experience prospering or flourishing as long as they do not embrace the values and norms that once sparked grassroots innovation. Young people will have to be re-educated in what constitutes a good life and a good economy, in order that they may embrace the individualism, vitalism, and expressionism that such a life requires. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Es un verdadero placer para nosotros, para la Fundación Cajasol, poder participar en este ciclo que organizamos entre la Real Academia Europea de Doctores y la Fundación Cajasol. Para nosotros es un honor tener la oportunidad de colaborar con esta prestigiosa institución, un verdadero referente en conocimiento y en investigación. Lo primero, también quisiera disculpar a nuestro presidente Antonio Pulido, que por razones de agenda no ha podido estar aquí hoy y tenía especial interés estar en este acto, en este importante acto. La verdad es que razones de agenda, como decía, lo han impedido y bueno, desde aquí les envío un saludo de su parte. Con este ciclo de conferencias que van a tener lugar aquí en Barcelona, pero también en nuestra sede de Sevilla, queremos dar un nuevo paso adelante para desarrollar una de las señas de identidad de la Fundación Cajasol. Contribuir desde nuestras actividades a estimular un análisis sosegado y profundo, un debate abierto y plural y un diálogo constructivo sobre la realidad que nos está rodeando. El pasado año ya tuvimos la oportunidad de impulsar en Andalucía un programa llamado Talento Nobel, en el que tuvimos también el privilegio de contar con otro premio Nobel. Nos impartió una conferencia allí en Sevilla, un premio Nobel de Economía, el profesor Eric Maskin. Para nosotros es, por tanto, un orgullo poder subir un nuevo escalón con la elaboración de este programa. Es nuestro compromiso con la formación de excelencia que guía nuestro trabajo y también el de nuestra Escuela de Negocios, una escuela de negocios que tenemos también en Andalucía que se llama Instituto de Estudios Cajasol. Esta serie de encuentros y conferencias que hoy inauguramos nos han acercado a las ideas y a las reflexiones de premios Nobel como el Dr. Phelps, a quien deseo felicitar por su exposición. Dr. Phelps, congratulations for your conference. De esta forma, tenemos la oportunidad de asomarnos a grandes cuestiones como son el funcionamiento de la economía. En este caso, hoy hemos escuchado acerca del empleo y de la innovación, las dinámicas que condicionan el crecimiento y la importancia, como decía, de esa innovación. Y todo ello en un contexto global sometido en estos momentos, como sabemos, a notables incertidumbres geopolíticas y económicas, tanto en Europa como en Estados Unidos y en otros lugares del mundo. Por ello, este tipo de encuentros para nosotros es de mayor interés.